the woman was that they don't need to learn Torah like the men do.
Right.
This is something that the Rebbe, I would say, he changed that attitude, and I myself taught Chassidus in the girls' high school. I actually did 1 year. Was a voluntary, was an elective course.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, last period, the girls could choose what course they want. And being that it was an elective, so I had a lot more freedom as far as to what we were going to learn.
Mhm.
And I decided, had quite a large group of girls, maybe 10, 12 girls. And I decided I'm going to learn the kind of Maimorim that Bachrim learn in yeshiva, but probably I never saw it in the curriculum of any of the girls' schools, Beis Yaakov, Beis Rivka, or wherever, right? So okay, fine, I'm taking a minor, and I introduced the course to the girls, and I said, listen, this course is going to be given so that if somebody happens to be standing outside the door and they listen in, but they don't see who's sitting there, they'll assume it's a group of all the yeshiva bachim are sitting and learning a deep maimer from Samach Vav or Hatzvi-Bais. It was actually the maimer we learned then was via Data Moskva from the Rebbe Rashab. And I can tell you that was one of my most rewarding years of teaching for a number of reasons. First of all, electives are a lot easier than curriculum courses, because there's, like I said, you have a lot of freedom. And also the girls that are there, you know that they're there because they want to be there, right? So whatever, but so it was a very interesting thing. So then probably the little story that you told off the record,
Yeah.
Mustafa was a girl with Parsha. She said she heard that from her brother that he learns these deep Maimarim, right? And she was jealous. That's probably what I'm assuming that probably
Something along those lines.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, on the way.
So was that mine? I think I brought one in here. Maybe I left it somewhere else. Is that yours? Oh, it is yours because yours, the Russian. Okay, so what I did today in preparation of this class, it's been quite a few weeks.
Baruch Hashem, you had Simchas in Moscow and
The Simcha of like technical things, but whatever. So I'm actually almost every other Shabbos, I'm not even in town.
You what?
I'm not here. I'm not in town. Go to spend Shabbos with my daughter Bracha. She moved to Monsey, New York. So I'm here this week, so I'm very happy. And I decided in preparation for the class, I'll do what I used to do, and that is to touch upon a topic that is brought up by the Alter Rebbe in this week's portion of the Torah Or, as the Rebbe encouraged back in the early 60s, that one should review the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe from these two Svarim of Torah Or and Likutei Torah, just like you review the Parsha on a weekly basis before the Parsha. I think I wasn't around at the Fabrengens in those days, but I think the Rebbe would refer to it as the Chassidic Parsha. So just like you have your Maver Sedra, Halacha and Shulchan Aruch, that a person has to review the Sedra, Shnai Mikra ve'echo Targum, you read the Pasuk, and then you read the translation and Targum. And likewise, said the Rebbe, one should also do so with regard to the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe. So
before Rabbi Miguel considered the Rebbe told him he has to learn Chassidic Parsha 5 times each week.
okay.
5 times each week. Wow.
5 times he should go through. Yes.
And he did it.
And I'm sure he did it. I'm sure he did it. Yes. So this week, the Alter Rebbe, there is a mimer from the Alter Rebbe on a few words of the bracha. It begins with a pasuk, part of a pasuk, which is in the Bracha to Shevet to Yehuda. That Yaakov, of course, this week, Parsha.Shiur, Yaakov gives a bracha to his sons before he passes away. And in the bracha of Yehuda, right, he blesses Yehuda with an abundance of wine and abundance of milk, right?
Yeah.
Meaning that in his land will grow grapevines in abundance, and then the sheep will also produce rich milk, right? But of course, in the bracha, things are said in somewhat metaphoric language or poetic language, let's say. So when Yaakov Avinu benched Yehuda, so he ends off the pasuk with Chachlile Einayim Meyayin. Your eyes will be red from wine. Rashi says that it's the derech of people who drink wine that their eyes get red.
Clearly, right?
Chachlili einayim miyayin. Chachlili, Rashi says, means red. Your eyes will get red from the wine. Uleved shinayim micholov, and your teeth will get shiny, pearly white from the abundance of milk. So this is the bracha that part of the bracha that Yehuda gives, that Yaakov gives to Yehuda. Please have a seat. Have a seat. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe makes a reference to the fact that both Yayin and Cholov is a reference to Torah. The truth is, and this I know only because I'm learning the Torah with footnotes, and the footnote says that the source of this is actually from the Radak. Radak was from the times of the Rishonim yet, and he wrote Pirush on Chumash, on Parshas. What? Reb David Kimchi. I did a quick Google to find out exactly when he lived. So he lived in the 12th century, meaning that he was yet from the Rishonim. Okay, the era of the Rishonim goes from the Eretz. From 9 years to the 10th century to, let's say, the 15th century, whatever, to the mid 1500s, let's say 900s to the 1500s, quite a period of time, a golden era of Torah study, right? And the Radak, everybody knows the Radak. Pirush, I don't think he's on the whole Chumash, he's only on Chumash Parshas, but he's, I believe, on the whole Tanakh and other things as well. This is the Pirush HaRadak. So the Radak makes the reference that in this bracha of Yaakov, obviously, Shutei Shel Mikra, the pasuk means it literally, that he will be blessed with grapevines that will produce wine, and with very healthy and sheep that will produce rich milk. Okay, this is the bracha. So the Alter Rebbe, what's the idea of yayin and what's the idea of cholov? Okay, metaphorically speaking, because we know some other things about wine. By the way, the Radak, when he compares the Torah to both wine and milk, he says simply because we know that there's a pasuk that yayin samach levav enosh, right? That wine makes a person joyful, right? And likewise, we have a pasuk by Torah, Pekudei Hashem Yisharim, Pekudei Yisharim Mesamchi Leiv, that the mitzvahs and the Torah of Hashem brings joy to one's heart. So there's a common denominator between wine and Torah. When it comes to milk, the Alter Rebbe says that milk, what is the first food that a child needs to have in order to sustain himself? It's milk. So milk sustains a person, right, from the very beginning. Later, as we get older, we learn, the child is introduced to other foods and so on and so forth. But initially, what is the foundation for sustenance is the milk that the child he nurses from the mother. And this is, by the way, by all mammals, right? So milk is a very, very, basic the means of sustenance.
Yeah, that's why actually modern classification calls a whale a mammal. Because in other words,
Oh, it does, it milks.
because in other words,
Well,
you look, yeah.
what I learned in third grade, I think, was that reptiles give birth by producing the egg outside of the body, and then it hatches. And mammals, the offspring actually develops within the mammal.
I mean, the whales actually don't give eggs.
No eggs.
No.
They give birth to whales. So
Yeah.
that's why they're a mammal. Right.
Hmm.
But they also milk the really?
Well, mammal, one of the Latin or Greek really means milk. Milk.
Yeah, so whales
Yeah.
They have- and it's what's it called? They give milks.
Yeah.
We're in the water. They latch on and they see, I learned something new. Yeah, I knew that whales were considered mammals, but I didn't realize that they also.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that milk is basically the foundation of sustenance, and likewise, Torah says that Radak is what sustains us. A Jew needs Torah to be properly sustained. Okay, you could live off donuts. You might not live very long, but you'll live. It'll sustain you, right? I mean, if you don't eat, you cannot live. If you eat just donuts, you'll live. Not going to be a very healthy life, but you'll live.
And your doctor may
Right.
kill you.
But if you want to be healthy, you eat healthy food, and then you live long and you're strong, and so on and so forth. Torah sustains the person. Can a person live without Torah? Yes, but spiritually speaking, it's a very unhealthy life. It's not a good life. Okay, it's an unhealthy, spiritually unhealthy life. By learning Torah, you are sustained spiritually in a very wholesome and healthy manner. Again, spiritually speaking. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe goes into a discussion. We know that part of our service of Hashem is to love Hashem, right? It's to love Hashem. So how do we know this? It's very simple. So pasuk, we say it twice a day at least, right? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What's the next pasuk? You should love Hashem. So love is in our service to Hashem. There's such a thing called the act of love. Okay. But we find a reference to two different kinds of love. One is what's called Ahavas Olam. Ahavas Olam, this is also expounded in Tanya as well. Ahavas Olam, basically, we reference it when we daven, and we say in the bracha before Shema, Ahavas Olam Ahavtanu, right? I think the simple translation is everlasting. Ahavas Olam Ahavtanu, we have an everlasting love for you, okay? The other Ava that's mentioned in other contexts is called Ava Rabba. Ava Rabba means an intense love. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe says, what's the difference between these two Ava, these two kinds of love, right? Says the first love, Avas Olam, is something that we have to do. The Ahava Rabba is a statement of something that exists. Okay, I was actually thinking this morning. I was thinking about a phrase, a saying that actually I've mentioned. Dennis Prager. I mentioned him a couple of times in this. I don't get to hear him a lot, but I admire him very much. I mean, I can't say I agree with everything. I agree with a lot. Politically speaking, religiously speaking, not so. But I still have. A lot of respect for Dennis Prager. So Dennis Prager has one of these quotes where he says, happiness is a moral obligation. Okay, so let's this is I'm going to expound on this for a little bit, only because Dennis Prager is onto something real. It's not just like an interesting idea, for the betterment of society and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, so when I take it apart, right, and I'm thinking that when you say a person is happy, right, the word happy is an adjective. right? You're describing the person, right?
Mhm.
Now, let's take another term, kind, right? When you say a person is kind, that person, you're describing the person. So the word kind is then an adjective. But if you look at the word kind is also a verb. The person engages in kindness. He's doing kindness. So it's both an adjective, but it's also a pe'ula, doing the kind thing. Now, it may technically still be considered what's it called, an adjective, because there the word kind is describing the act. But let's look at the word kind in reference to the person. The person is doing kind, right? So, so what Dennis Prager basically is saying, he says happiness is just not a state of being; it's something that you have to do. You have to do. And my sense, this is a totally personal. I'm not even sure that we should turn off the recording for this, but I think it's something that the Rebbe taught us, that it's not just about being happy. Sometimes you have to actually actively be happy, make yourself happy, right? And the Rebbe was one of the things that the Rebbe would I don't want to use the word demand, but the Rebbe would expect. The Rebbe would encourage happiness, right? Now take for example what happened by the Yom Kippur War, right? So by the Yom Kippur War, what happened is that the days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, these were very difficult days. Nobody knew what was going to happen, right? And yet the Rebbe's response, let me give it a little more background over here. So the Agudas HaRabbonim actually wanted to establish a fast, but they couldn't make a full day fast, right? Because people just fasted Yom Kippur. So they wanted to do a communal half-day fast. And it's something that they have done in the past. I guess Rabbonim would get together, and there was a time of Atzara, right? And they would declare a half-a-day fast at least, right? Sometimes a full day fast. Generally, the few times that I remember the Agudas HaRabbonim instituting something like this, the Rebbe would actually, support it. The Rebbe would join along. For example, when it came to the issue of Mihu Yehudi, again, the Agudas HaRabbonim, because in Eretz Yisrael, they were being very stubborn about adjusting the law of return, that it should include only those who have converted with one word was missing, al pi halacha, right? And the Rebbe saw that as a catastrophe, right? And there was years that the Rebbe, there was not a farbrengen, but the Rebbe spoke publicly, and the Rebbe didn't address the issue, right? So there was once the Agudas HaRabbonim wanted to declare actually a fast, a big kinus. People should fast a half a day. Rabbanim should come and to highlight the catastrophe here that's involved, right? So and the Rebbe actually would would participate, but in this particular time, the Rebbe actually did not. He refrained from participating, and the Rebbe addressed it publicly. The Rebbe, I think, spoke twice in those days between Yom Kippur and twice at least. It was the night before Erev Sukkot, which was a normal thing for the Rebbe to farbrengen on that night, but there was also farbrengen the night before, I believe. And the Rebbe addressed it. And the Rebbe said, now is a time of simcha. After Yom Kippur, we're already beginning this man simchaseinu of Sukkot. We're now in Sukkot mode, says the Rebbe. And the Torah expects from us now, simcha. It's actually a command. You shall rejoice, which is interesting. Because here you have a pasuk in Torah that maybe, I don't think Dennis Prager used that as his source, but the pasuk is saying it as an instruction. V'samachta, you shall rejoice. It's something you do, right? If the Torah says this is what we're supposed to do now, the Rebbe said, in spite of what's going on and the anxiety and the worry and everything, involved, right? Now's the time for simcha. And the Rebbe encouraged Simcha. It was like unbelievable. That was the most joyous sukkahs that I could ever remember. Tavshin Lamed Dalet. As a matter of fact, and when there weren't the first night of sukkahs, again, people were very, very anxious. And there were a lot of guests from Eretz Yisrael who had, left families behind in Israel. It was scary. It was scary. I mean, I was too young at the time to really, be aware of how scary it was. But it was a scary time. So, like the first night of Sukkot, normally what happens in Lubavitch? Fabrengen. Everybody knows here with Fabrengen. Now you have the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, but this was where you dance in the street. But this was before that had started. Fabrengens. But there wasn't much Fabrengen going on in Crown Heights, right? So what was instead? So there was a police car, for example, parked on the corner of Eastern Parkway and Kingston, and they opened the windows and had the radio on, so that people were standing around the police car listening to the news from Eretz Yisrael, right? The Rebbe had a very unusual farbrengen. The second night of Sukkot, after Ma'ariv, before people went home for Kiddush, the Rebbe came down for a farbrengen. Very unusual time. Never happened before, I don't think. And you couldn't make Kiddush at the farbrengen because you couldn't. It was in the shul, it wasn't in the sukkah, so it was nothing, no wine, nothing. Right, Chabad is very, very particular about not eating or even drinking outside the sukkah. So the farbrengen had no wine, no mezainis. It was before Kiddush, the second night of Sukkot, and the purpose for the farbrengen was the Rebbe mentioned that he was upset by the fact that there were no farbrengens the night before. This was after the Rebbe before Sukkot was encouraging Simcha, and now everybody has to be besimcha, right? As an obligation, right? You have an obligation to be besimcha, right? And the Rebbe started by saying he heard that there weren't farbrengens in the shchuna, in the neighborhood, right? And they've been encouraged to be farbrengens. There were some really very strong, powerful words that the Rebbe said. They actually ended the farbrengen. The land should be filled with farbrengens. Kemayim layom chasim, just the way like the Rambam ends off, right, with the pasuk from Navi. Thus, the world will be filled with godliness. The world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem. Kemayim layom chasim, the way water covers the land, right? And the ocean covers the ocean. So likewise, the world should be filled with farbrengens, right? It was powerful words. Let me tell you, from that second night of Sukkot until after Simchas Torah was literally one long farbrengen. It was one of the most joyous Sukkos that I remember. Okay, and the Rebbe again, the Rebbe spoke that there will be victory. There'll be victory, even more, a greater victory than the 6-day war, right? There was very encouraging and so on. I'm giving you just one example. And by the way, the memories of that were so helpful now when we had that terrible news that came on Simchas Torah. The Lubavitchers knew what to do because they remember they were told what the Rebbe had said in the Yom Kippur War, 1973. And so he says, you know what? We have to be besimcha. That's all. And the Rebbe made the point that dafke simcha is going to be what's going to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish by a fast. So since the mitzvah now is simcha will accomplish it. And not only that, we also have the general rule that's brought down that simcha. This is in the Mefarshim that say the Alter Rebbe actually. There's the great question that in the Teichacha, right? The Kisave, right, where it says all of these terrible things will befall you. Why? Because you didn't serve Hashem b'simcha. And the question that's asked, and the Alter Rebbe also asked this question. So what do you mean? Because you served Hashem, but you just didn't do it b'simcha. For this you deserve such, right? So the Alter Rebbe says no. The reason why you deserve these punishments is because you deserve the punishments. However, the pasuk is telling us, had you served Hashem b'simcha, guess what? All of that would have been erased, right? Because that's the nature of simcha. And the Alter Rebbe brings a marshal of a king who's in a bad mood, and he signs terrible decrees or whatever, right? And then people realize, whoa, this is getting a little out of hand. So what do? They bring the court jester to come, and once he's in a good mood, right? He said, whoa, what did I just sign over there? Yeah, give it back. I don't, right? Because Simcha is Eretz Kol HaGedorim. It breaks through normal boundaries. So that's the power of Simcha.
What year was this?
It was 1973 by the Yom Kippur War. Yeah. The thing that I wanted to say,
They weren't already started.
yeah, there's a lot of, being a chassid, right, is you get to Parsha.Shiur the Rebbe, right? Now, of course, we don't we keep the Rebbe like in a very, there was a tzaddik. That's what a chassid believes, and a tzaddik is something, not an ordinary person, right? But the fact that we were able to observe the Rebbe, and the Rebbe interacted through the Fabrengens, or when you walk by a dollar, or go into Yechidus, right? So you had an actual relationship with the Rebbe, right? And just by observing the Rebbe, there are so many things, the impressions that it makes on a person, right? There's actually a film that was made by Malka Tauger. Malka Tauger, she's married to the writer.
Right. I think his name is Rabbi
Eli Tauger, right?
Mm-hmm.
They actually lived in Pittsburgh for a little bit. And when she was in Pittsburgh, she's very creative, and she created a film for children. The point of the film was like making like a clip of the Rebbe doing something, and then saying, what could we learn from that? So, for example, she would have a clip of the Rebbe davening. Children, look how the Rebbe does not look outside of the siddur, right? Like as if the Rebbe doesn't know the davening by heart. Of course the Rebbe knows. Yet the Rebbe always was followed the davening, followed in a siddur. So you're able to observe that, and then it makes an impact on you, right? Right? So another thing, like for example, the Rebbe, when he would walk out of the car, and if there was, let's say a police officer, right? The Rebbe would always salute. Right? The Rebbe had better things. He was on the way to the oil. You could be sure that the Rebbe's mind, right, was dealing with much greater things, right? He never neglected to acknowledge the presence of a police officer, the presence of a police officer, or whatever they would know, like things like that. So I don't remember exactly what the whole thing, but the point is, we look at the Rebbe. There is a tzaddik, right? But that doesn't mean that we cannot look at the Rebbe and actually somehow relate to the Rebbe the way he lives, and to some degree, to emulate and be impacted by it. So this is one of the things that had a big impact on me, because I would see the Rebbe doing simcha, not just being besimcha. So, I was, I'm kind of like I'm a melancholy person, right? But that's not an excuse. Now you have to do simcha. So you're melancholy, okay, just do simcha. Can I share something personal? After Gimel Tammuz, the hardest day of my life was going to Shul Shmini Atzeres for the first night of Hakafos. I remember the Rebbe's Hakafos. There's no way to describe it, right? The simcha and so on and so forth. And here it's Gimel Tammuz, and I'm walking to Shul. I would literally feel like there's a black cloud over my head. I was depressed. I was like, everything was dark, right? What am I going to do? I come to Shul. Now, Shmini Atzeres is interesting, because Shmini Atzeres, up until Hakafos, everything is kind of like subdued. Everybody's there, Shul, Daven, this and that, right? You're not in Simchas Torah mode until you make Yiddish, and then you come back to Shul, and then starts Hakafos. Now it's ready Simcha mode. Right? Now, I said, no. I walk into Shul, not early. Everybody's already there. I never come to Shul early on, Friday night or Yom Tov, right? And the first thing I do is I start dancing like I'm a shuganer. And I take my hat, I turn it upside down, and then I go around, sure, I turn everybody's hat upside down, right? I was not in the mood for simcha. But I said, no, I have to do simcha, right? So that's something that I saw the Rebbe. I don't want to say this maybe, but I don't know that the Rebbe was just naturally a happy person. You know what I mean? The Rebbe was reserved. The Rebbe was actually a very reserved person, right? But I saw the Rebbe deliberately being besimcha, if I could say that. Do you share that sentiment yourself? I saw the Rebbe deliberately making a decision to be besimcha. He asked the Chassidim, right, to do that, and the Rebbe did it himself. This is my alabatisha, as they say, my take on what I observed, right? So that's called doing simcha. Simcha is something you do. It's also an adjective, but it's something you have to do, okay? Says the Alter Rebbe that ahavas olam is the avo that a person has to do. You have to create this ahava. How do you create this ahava? You create it by focusing. It's called this beinunus. You begin to realize that everything that's happening in this world is happening because Hashem is directing it, right? If you have the right proper bitachon, so then you believe that everything that Hashem is doing, He's doing for good, right? Once you've developed that bitachon, right, there are the things that are obviously good that happen in your life that unfortunately sometimes we don't acknowledge because we just take things for granted, right? If you stop and think about those things, no, they're not just happening. They're happening because Hashem is wanting it to happen. Now, yes, that's based on bitachon. That's based on your emunah, that everything that happens is because Hashem is making it happen. The more you develop that emunah and that bitachon, guess what happens? The greater you begin to appreciate what Hashem is doing for you. You know why? Because what the emunah and the bitachon does, it's not only in those situations where obviously things are happening good, when there are things don't look like they're happening so good, and you're able to accept them with the emunah bitachon, knowing that ultimately it is good, right? Guess what happens? Hashem lets you actually realize. He shows you that how it ultimately it is good. Now, if you just live your life, just experiencing things and just reacting to it in the moment, without looking at a bigger picture, then there are going to be things that, oh, well, great. And there are going to be things, darn, right? That's going to be your initial reaction, and that's normal, you know. After all, we're primarily a nefesh habanis, consciously speaking, right? And that's the way the behemoth reacts, right? But a Jew is expected to rise above his little behemoth, right? And he learns shara bitachon, and he develops a strong bitachon, right? And when he develops that strong bitachon, everything changes. Everything that happens in your life changes. Starting with the good things, you begin to see them as because it was designed to happen, you know, because Hashem cares for you. You take it a little different approach. You don't just take it for granted. No, Hashem is being kind to me now. What are you going to feel? You're going to feel ava. Then you have things that are unfortunate, and you say, okay, this doesn't feel good. This is bad. But you know what? I'm going to hang in there. I'm going to believe that Hashem is doing it because Hashem loves me, right? And then guess what? When you take that approach, I mean, I'm speaking personally, you know what? In the end, yeah, actually, what's it called? Yeah, I see. And not only that, if you're really lucky and you open your mind up enough, you're able to actually see that, wow, Baruch Hashem, that happened because the good that came out of it that never had been had it not gone to those stages, right? My niece, Rivki Deren, Allah Hashalom. So you know how the end of every email or whatever, you could put in like a caption, what's it called, right?
Signature?
A signature thing. But so her thing was, in the end, it's always good. If it's not the end. Something like that. And if not, it's because it's not the end. Now, she had an amazing way of approaching life. She had a very difficult life, believe me. But I don't know, she has good parents or whatever, or she just was naturally just a really amazing person, right? And she had like a really difficult life, you know what I mean? Physically speaking. So yeah. So that's the thing. So that's called Ahavas Olam, right? The issue though with Ahavas Olam, the issue is that it's dependent on you. That's why it's called Ahavas Olam. Olam is also a word that's used to reference the reality within you live, the world. This is the world, this is the world. So I think that the simple pshat is Ahavas Olam, because Olam also means lasting. So a lasting love. We have love. It's in English, something, whatever. But Ahavas Olam is when you look at it a little deeper and you see the reference to the word Olam. The word Olam, by the way, the word Olam in Chassidus mentions quite often that it also has the interest. It's related to the word Halem, right? Now, what's Halem mean? Halem means concealment. It says this world is really one big concealment for somebody who looks at it and accepts it as the absolute reality. It has that capacity that it could actually be approached as being the absolute reality, but that's all because that's what the world is. The world hides the deeper truths. So you look at it and you don't accept it, right? So this is a ahava within that context, right? That you're living in a world where things are happening, right? And some of those things that are happening upon initial observation, they're very negative and hurtful and painful and so on and so forth, right? Within that context, you develop an ahava, you contemplate, like I described up until now, this process based on, of course, bitachon and amunah and Hashem, right? And guess what? Within the reality, where things look bad, you could actually come to a conclusion where it's actually very good. And that will just naturally develop ahava. So when it says v'yahavtas Hashem Elokecha, it's a tzivui, it's a commandment. You can do it, right? I mean, the Alter Rebbe in the Hakdama to Shayichet Ve'emunah, the second part of Tanya, so the Alter Rebbe says that this is an ava about which there could be a tzivui. The question is, how could you command Ava? Ava is a feeling. You can't command a feeling. Says the Alter Rebbe, you absolutely could. How could you command a feeling? You focus your mind, your thoughts, right? And if you focus, and that you have control over, right? Because as the Alter Rebbe, we know that thought is something that it's a levush. It's something that you could put on or take off, right? Meaning that you have control of what your thoughts should be. Like if you want to punch somebody in the nose, right? That's a mice. Everybody knows you have control because if you do punch him, you're gonna get in trouble. So what do you mean? Why am I getting in trouble? He may be angry, and right? Now, if that was an animal doing it, then you say sorry. You made him angry. You have to expect that, right? But if a person does it, you see no. Acts are levushim. What does it mean that it's a clothing? You don't have to put it on. You want to hit him, but don't put on that garment, right? So the same thing is with thoughts. Thoughts are also garments. It's a more inner garment, right? Harder to control, but not impossible to control, okay? So the ultimate Beinoni, by the way, is not just the person who controls his acts, or even not just the Beinoni who controls how he expresses himself, right? So you want to swear, but you stop yourself, right? Because you know it's wrong. Right? Or you want to express anger and you stop yourself, okay, you took off that garment, right? Best thing is to replace it with a better garment. But the same thing is with machshava. I shouldn't be thinking that, right? I got to put on a better garment. When it comes to avo, there are garments that you have to put on, right? Things to contemplate, things to focus on, right? And guess what? What happened is you've created ahava. There's a natural response, the way the body works. Mayach, lev. You use your mayach, the lev is going to respond. And by proper contemplation, the lev, all of a sudden you feel oh, you mamish appreciate, and you have love for Hashem. And you have love for Hashem. And again, that's all avas olam. It's an act, it's a verb, not an adjective. Having said that, though, says the Alter Rebbe, there's another kind of ahava, and that one's actually more like an adjective. It's not something that you do. It's something that you're born with. Okay? So, on the one hand, it's somewhat elusive. It's called ahava musuteres. It's hidden. It's hidden. So there are certain things about the state of your existence, right, that are actually hidden, that you're not necessarily even aware of, right? That ahava is the ahava, that's a Yerusha from Avraham Avinu. You have it by virtue of the fact that you have a neshama, and you're a yid, and because you have that neshama, there is embedded in your very DNA this ahava, right? That ahava, by the way, is in a way a much more intense ahava, in a way. Why? Because since the avas olam is dependent on the garment that you put on, it's dependent on what you do mentally, right? Being that it's dependent on what you do mentally, you are in control of how much it'll actually occupy your mind. And therefore, hence, you are in control of how deep the effect is going to be on the heart. You could think, and you get all excited, then you go on with life, and everything that you thought seems to have somehow faded, right? Whoa, what do you mean? I just had such a great morning, and had such a good conversation, and I became to such a feelings of appreciation, right? And then you go on with your life, and everything that happened to you in the morning could, chas v'shalom, fade, right? And then you have to do it again and again. And the more you do it, the less it'll fade, perhaps, hopefully, right? Because all of it is dependent on your engaging. It's a deed. It's a verb. It's something you do. Being, however, that the ava, and this, by the way, is called the ava rabba. The ava rabba is that a very intense, strong ava. Is not something that you do. It's something that is, right? So it's an adjective. This is something that describes a yid. He's one who loves Hashem. So you're not creating it. Who did create it? Why do you have it? Oh, Hashem created it. Wow. So it exists on his terms, not on your terms. And therefore, when that ava comes out, right? Wow, does it come out? It comes out in such powerful, strong ways. Okay. Now it's very hard if you want to use anecdotal situations to say, "Oh, I think there is just an outburst of that ava rabba, that ava musuteres." It's hard to say. It's hardest to say when in reference to your own self. It's a little easier when you observe it in other people. It's easier to diagnose, I would say, right? So we see, especially now, for example, in Eretz Yisrael, the stories that are coming out from Eretz Yisrael, right? Where people, the last thing on their mind would be to put on mezuzah on the door or to put on tefillin. These are people that were just anti-religious, right? And somehow something triggered, right? It wasn't from his bonus. It wasn't from engaging in things that will bring you to some appreciation and ultimately to some love, right? Spontaneous, right? And therefore very intense, right? Very
And
intense.
Israelis, according to what I read, are more intense to begin with. So,
It's just what you read, but yeah, because they were actually very intensely anti-religious.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, boom, right? Okay, so this is just like one anecdotal thing, right? And like I say, who are we to diagnose? But we know that it exists, right? And there are times that if you look at it from the right perspective, you say, "Oh my gosh, that was the neshama. That was the neshama." Okay. I spoke a few weeks ago. I remember a little bit closer to after what happened that Avarabba, by the way, is sometimes driving people to do things that they're not even aware why they're doing it, right? And I mentioned that the Rebbe once spoke back in the 1950s about a group of Jewish teenagers or whatever who, instead of coming to Hakafis, they had a, what's it called? They went to a nightclub or whatever to dance and to rejoice or whatever. And then the Rebbe, we don't have time to go into it, but the Rebbe said, it was the neshama, the Yiddish neshama, wanted to dance on Simchas Torah. The behemoth, though, the Nevesh Obamas, no way, I'm not going to get this show, right? I don't do that. I don't do it, right? We don't do that, right? So somehow the behemoth, at the end of the day, somehow got them to go to dance, right? So they were dancing. The Rebbe looked at it from a completely different perspective. They have the Adam Soteris. That Adam Soteris will do anything to come out, right? It's fighting to come out. So it ended up coming out in a little bit of a little distorted way, whatever. But that's where it's coming from, says the Rebbe. And the reason why the story came up, and what the Rebbe spoke about it was because I don't think anybody ever said anything Chas v'Shalom, but this whole thing this catastrophe that happened. So one of the greatest karbonis, the greatest sacrifices, were the people that were engaged in not a holy. But if you look at it from the Rebbe's perspective, but they were dancing in Simchas Torah. Is it the way you should have been dancing? Maybe not. But there's still a neshama involved. So that's another form of this avarabo, by the way, because it's innate. And therefore, sometimes it'll push a yid to do something as long as he gets him to do something, right? Okay. Now, to finish off, that's the yayin part. Yayin is nichnas yayin yotzasait. How do I get in touch with that avarab? The avasaylom, okay, I understand. It's my job. I got to do something, right? Get a strong bitachon, right? Understand everything happens from Hashem. Constantly repeat that to yourself. Then apply it to actually what's happening in your life. And say, okay, this one was good. Oh, I remember to thank Hashem. This one was not so good. Wait, I'm going to still thank Hashem because He's hiding something there for me. I know. And if I just hang in there, I will discover it. Okay, but these are all things that you have to do. What do you do about that avarabba? How do I get in touch? You're telling me I have this avarabba. It's in my DNA, right? How do I get in touch with it? So the Alter Rebbe tells us that's why the Radak says that yayin is dichnas yayin yotzasait. You want to say that hidden element of your existence. You want to experience it. You want it to come out. You got to drink the wine. What's the wine? You have to learn Torah. When a yid learns Torah, he's connecting to something deeper within his own existence. Yeah. So that's the idea. That's what the Radak says, that yayin is a reference to Torah. The avarabba will come out by drinking wine. Do you know what wine you have to drink? Drink the wine of Torah. Learn Torah. Get drunk over Torah. Right? And you will have then connected with that avarabba, if you do it properly. Okay? What's the idea of the chalav, the milk? The milk is nourishment, right? So the nourishment is basically the process of digestion. You take what the child is drinking, the milk, and they drink the milk and they process it. They digest it. What's going on?
Okay.
So they process it, right? Says the Alter Rebbe, it's not just enough the wine. There has to be the digestion. Digestion is you have to say, this Torah is not just something they're learning. I want this Torah to affect me.
That's a teeth. Shinayim.
Like Shinayim, right? It says it makes the teeth white. What do teeth do? Teeth chew, right? What's chewing do? Chewing breaks it down, right? So I gotta break down my what's it called, my persona. Right? I'm not gonna just learn Torah because unfortunately you could learn Torah and it could have actually a negative effect on your persona because you start patting yourself on the back. Wow, I'm so great. Look how much Torah I learned. No, you want that Torah to connect to that inner Ava, the Ava Tiferes. You got to also start chewing. Chewing means you have to analyze and say, 1 second, is this Torah actually affecting me in a positive way? Or am I just going on in my good life and being happy about the fact that I've accomplished another Tiferes or another Blat of Gemara or whatever, right? And at the end of the day, says the Alter Rebbe, the bracha to Yehuda is that Chachile Einayim Meyayin. What's the pasuk? Chachile Einayim Meyayin, Lavan Shinayim Mechalav. You shall learn a lot of Torah. Apply the Torah like you're digesting food, and guess what? You will get in touch with the Abba Rabba, that intense, innate love that exists within the neshama of every single Jew. Good Shabbos. So that is the Torah, our lesson for the week of Parshas Vayechi. Okay.